Well, welcome to the Media Roundtable podcast. We are here, not exactly live, but we are here in Austin, Texas for South by Southwest. We are, as always, talking with leading voices in the industry about what they create, why they create it, and the impact that they want to have on the world. So whether you're a member of the marketing community, or you're in the media, or you're a podcast listener who just cares about the direction of this country and the messages that you advance, we want you to feel good about what you consume, what you distribute, and what you support. I'm your host, Dan Granger, and today we're joined by a very special guest, Lisa Carmen Wang. Welcome, Lisa. I'm going to read a quick bio on you, and then I'm going to ask you to fact check me. Okay, so Lisa is a four-time U.S. national champion and Hall of Fame gymnast turned serial entrepreneur, angel, and crypto investor. She's a keynote speaker, a branding advisor, writer, and executive coach. Now, she founded a company called She Works, which was a community platform for 20,000 female entrepreneurs, had a great exit with that, and is also, by the way, Forbes 30 Under 30, Entrepreneur Magazine, 100 Most Powerful Women. And she's going to tell us about some exciting new ventures that she's actually launching today, the day that you are listening to this podcast, the day that we release this podcast. She's got a big announcement that she's going to share with us. So welcome, Lisa. Thank you for joining us at the Media Roundtable.
Excited to be here.
All right, so let's go back to the beginning. I'm not going to interrogate you too much on your athletic career, but I do think it's relevant, and just getting to know your story a little bit. Can you frame the conversation a little bit and share some of how your career as an athlete led to your career as an entrepreneur?
So I always say that the most important skill that I learned from being a gymnast is the ability to fall over and over and over again in front of hundreds of thousands of people, and to experience that physical pain and internal humiliation and shame, and regardless, to get back up and put a smile on my face and keep going. And that ability to fall down and get back up is this internal strength and resilience that has carried through with me to be an entrepreneur, to be an investor, to ride the ups and the downs. And I think it creates within you this ability to trust yourself, because no matter what you pursue, and especially in entrepreneurship, you are going to hit extreme obstacles. And I think the successful entrepreneurs are the ones who just keep going, honestly. And it's that trust in yourself that builds this self-worth and self-confidence. And I think that there was something that someone had said to me. So early on, after my decade-long career as a gymnast from 9 to 19, I actually missed the Olympic Games by 0.25 tenths of a point, which was probably one of the hardest things I had ever experienced, because I'd spent 10 years dreaming of the Olympics, and to suddenly have that dream shattered and lose my identity completely because I had banked on that, and to be able to get back up again and say, you know what, this is not how my story ends, to decide that I was going to book a one-way ticket to Russia, to the Olympic training center there, the most rigorous training center in the world, and say, this time I'm going to become the best gymnast I can possibly be for a year, but I'm going to do it for me, to prove to myself that I don't quit when I'm down, and to finally get to that last national championships where I swept gold, won every single gold medal. And then I said, peace, guys, I'm out. This is how a champion leaves. But it was still really painful, at the end, because I kind of buried that feeling of not being good enough because I missed the Olympics. And someone said to me years later, they said, you know what, you got the biggest blessing because you were forced to fail so hard at such a young age, and you were forced to figure out how to deal with those pieces and rebuild your identity and your sense of self. And not a lot of people have the opportunity to fail as badly and publicly as you did, and to develop that inner strength. So I think I've developed this perspective of no matter what happens, you figure out how to turn it into a good story, and you always come out a winner.
How old were you when that happened?
19.
Wow. And you had been doing it for 10 years.
Yeah.
Because you had said that you decided you were going to be in the Olympics when you were a 9-year-old child.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Okay, so now what you're talking about is and I know we're going to be focused on a lot of women's issues, but you're talking about a truth that I think everybody struggles with, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do we deal with the internal, like just the physical motivation of trying to shut down and run away when we fail, when we're ashamed, when we're embarrassed, and when we don't have a straight path forward? Can you just talk tactically, super tactically, about what goes on in your mind that takes you from the discouraged place to the decision to get up and go again?
So I've developed something over the course of the last decade, I suppose, what I call metacognition. And metacognition is the ability to feel what I feel in that moment, that pain, that anger, the shame, and to step outside of myself and almost be the narrator, viewing myself in whatever pain it is and kind of rising above and saying, is this going to kill me? Mm-hmm. Is this really, like, can I get back up again? And it doesn't mean I negate how I feel in that moment, but I do this exercise with my coaching clients. For women, it's the heroine's journey. For men, it's the hero's journey. But it's to step outside of yourself and become an objective third person narrator and say, basically narrate yourself through a past failure and remember what your superpowers were, to say, when Lisa failed that time, she picked herself up by doing this. She utilized her superpowers of resilience and empathy and was able to then garner the support of the team around her to eventually reach her goal. And she came out so much stronger after that. So it's an actual exercise of reminding yourself of how strong you are, the superpowers that are inherently there, and then to realize that you can overcome anything.
That's some heavy shit. That's really cool. I love that. Did you make that up, by the way? Did you coin that phrase?
I don't think I coined the phrase. I definitely did the exercise. Like, I came up with the exercise.
Yeah. You call it
I call it
metacognition.
I call the exercise the bad bitch heroine's journey now.
Yeah, well, you can rebrand that.
But, metacognition is, I don't know where I first heard the term used, but I now do multiple layers of meta where I'm like, I observe myself, observing myself, because I want to understand what is objective truth at any one time and question my own perception of things.
Is there objective truth?
I don't think so, but it's basically removing my emotional reaction from things, because everyone has those, and instead of getting angry, it's like, okay, this anger is valid, but what am I actually responding to? Am I actually responding to some sort of trauma from my childhood, or am I responding to someone rejecting me from something, or is it really about this person? Which I've learned most of the time, people are they're reacting to something within themselves, not the other person. It sounds like a key part of this, though, is just giving yourself the space to go through the cycle of grief, the stages of grief, and to allow that to happen before you decide to or not to continue. Is that? Yeah, it's right? The ability to create space between the stimulus and the response. Wow. If we could only. Okay, let's talk about enoughness, shall we? I know that was something that you put a lot of work into through a podcast. Mm-hmm. That was your first podcast. Yep. And an important one for everybody. I've got a 17-year-old daughter. I want her to listen to all your stuff. I'm going to put together like a playlist for some of your stuff. So
can you talk about the concept of enoughness and also, is that something that is dynamic? Are you in a steady state of that, or is it like enoughness is different every day for you? Like, what's the background and what's your perspective on how that works in your life?
So enoughness was the podcast that I launched because I was trying to answer the question, when is it ever enough? And when will I ever be enough? Because by the time I was in my mid-20s, I was already experiencing this phenomenon of no matter how many things I accomplished, whether I got the Forbes 30 under 30, whether I got like the next title, the next more money, the next accomplishment, that external achievement was not resonating with my internal fulfillment. And there was that gap. And I have observed people much older than me who were still chasing money, chasing external validation. And I was like, I don't want to feel like this forever and to constantly feel like there's some sort of external approval that I need in order to feel internally fulfilled. So I need to figure out how to deal with this now. And so I started interviewing people who were externally successful across many different industries, successful entrepreneurs, investors, athletes, creators, to ask if basically they also felt like they weren't good enough. And lo and behold,
turns out, right?
that a lot of these people who are successful are actually like compensating for some sort of thing and a chip on their shoulder. And I realized until you really address that deep-seated thing that's driving you, that emptiness, you're always going to feel that way. And so I realized through the course of that podcast that my chip on my shoulder was still the fact that I missed the Olympics so many years earlier. And even though I had thought I closed that chapter by coming out as national champion that last year, there was that pain of having lost a decade-long dream. And I tried to brush it off, but I think it was only when I fully acknowledged it and said, even though I wasn't enough for that particular Olympics, it doesn't negate the years of practice and strength that I developed as an athlete and as a human being over that entire time period. And now I'm going to own that part of my story, because interestingly, up until that point, anytime people asked me to introduce myself, I completely left out the fact that I was a gymnast. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't watch the Olympics up to that point.
Well, hold on, was that shame, or was that because you wanted to write a chapter that was not skewed or defined by the previous chapter?
I think I was also trying to find my next passion and the next thing that I could anchor my identity on. And because I'd been a gymnast for so long and an athlete. And so, but I do think there was still this like, well, I can't say I went to the Olympics, therefore I'm still not good enough. And then I realized that was ridiculous. So after many years of internal work, but I think going to this concept of enoughness, I see it still everywhere. And I think that's what makes me feel really comfortable around people, regardless of their status or wealth or anything, because I see the flawed and child inside everyone and can connect on that human level. And I've gotten to a place myself, having really faced the painful experiences that I've had now, especially as a woman going through my career, where you go through so much stuff that we don't even talk about, and to learn how to, again, turn all of that pain into strength. And this, I can really say that I feel enough today. And it was like, I feel very content with who I am. I have done so much work also, and this is something that I do with a lot of my female coaching clients. It's learning how to stand in front of the mirror every day and actually love yourself and actually say, I'm a rock star and I freaking love you and you look great, your butt looks great, your face is beautiful. Like, it doesn't matter And to be able to give that love to yourself and to truly love yourself, that is the moment at which it doesn't really matter how other people react to you or whether or not they approve of you, because I think it gives a sense of calm and groundedness that is actually contagious, I found, because if you're at ease with yourself, it gives other people the space to really be heard.
Well, you can tell why this is resonating so deeply with so many people. I heard you talking about enoughness and the voices that so many women hear that lead to approval seeking and then ultimately inequality. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I think in particular, enoughness affects women and men very differently based off of the way society has trained us. So as a society, they tell women, you are not good enough in your being. You are not pretty enough. You are not smart enough. You are not brave enough. You are not prepared enough. You are not experienced enough. And so a woman who feels like she's not enough physically shrinks. She takes up less space. Her voice is softer. She asks for permission. And you can spot an insecure woman. But on the other hand, society tells men, you don't have enough. You don't have enough cars. You don't have enough money. You don't have enough women. You don't have enough property. And so a man who's insecure and doesn't feel like he's enough does the opposite of the woman and physically expands. He's like, more cars, more money, more titles, whatever it is. And the unfortunate thing is that the business world rewards his insecure behavior and it punishes her insecure behavior. And so you have this increasing gap of just like insecure egos that are driving our economy, that are driving our media and our corporations. And I think we're at this point where it's like we need to recognize the root of the issue and the insecurities really that are driving our economy pretty much. So I think that's something to really understand, and especially for the voices that tell women, you know, I call this good girl brainwashing. That tell you have to be pleasing and polite and obey the rules and not take up too much space. That all feeds into this manifestation of not enoughness, which says stay small.
And you also talked about the media's role in all that. Mm-hmm. You know, I think you listed this could be a father's voice, a boss's voice, the person you're trying to get investment from, but it's also the media. Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of what we're starting to move into talking about and what we're dealing with today. What is the media's role in specific ways? Like I think most of us understand in the abstract that, you know, there's lots of magazines that set expectations, but like in a very personal, like on a very individual level, how is the media getting into people's heads?
Well, I think just the way the media shows women, it's still very much the male gaze, right? Women are sexualized in a way that makes them seen as objects. You know, there's no question there. And it does this weird thing where it sexualizes women as objects, but at the same time creates sexual shame in women that they're not allowed to step into their feminine and sexual power, that there's been something wrong if she does show her body because she's proud of her body. Obviously, it tells women that you have to be a certain shape at any certain time, and that fluctuates depending on the era that we're living in. But that, again, her worth is based off of her ability to look a certain way. And similarly, the media tells men different messages. You know, it's not displaying men as objects in their bodies, but it is displaying men as chasing after some of these superficial goals and saying that your worth is based off of being surrounded by hot women on a boat or whatever images there are. And I think it's just driving these extreme behaviors of toxic masculinity and whatever you want to call them, like minimized femininity, like minimizing feminine power. And instead of showcasing that really there's parts of feminine and masculine in all of us, and that we really are human, and that there are vulnerable stories that everyone can share. And I think that's really what I would like to see more of, is just people being able to show strength through vulnerability, through really telling their stories of overcoming, rather than just, I think, external markers of success and beauty.
Okay, so one of the things that has brought us here to Austin for South by Southwest, and thank you in advance for being a part of our event here for the unveiling of Barometer, where we have the partnership. What you're describing as the problem in media is not presently going to be solved by what we're introducing, but perhaps it could play a part as we evolve it. So just for context, we're releasing a tool called Barometer that is a brand safety tool, but basically it is nutrition labels for media content. And it takes into account not just keywords, but actual context. There's a lot of AI and legitimate tech behind it that I could have never brought into being, but our partner did. And looking at things like the sentiment behind a subject that's being spoken about, so that people can look at that and go, do I want to advance the way that they're handling this type of subject? And I wonder if some of the messages that you're talking about that are diminishing women and their value, I wonder if that's the kind of thing that could start to be identified through third parties, so that we could have more awareness of where those types of messages are taking hold and more accountability for it. Because it's, I think we all understand it on an abstract level, but to actually combat it, to actually create change in how we communicate with each other, like, you have to have awareness first of what does that look like in real life. So I wonder if there's something that we can explore on that just as we're going. And I know I'm like pitching you on, hey, maybe we could like create a strategic opportunity here. But I think that I want this podcast and this discussion to be a like live workshop environment where we can figure out like, what are the problems and what can we actually do about it? Does that even make sense, by the way? I don't even know if I'm explaining this in a way that seems practical.
So what I will say is that I think if women's narratives and voices are heard, we actually need to stop censoring them. Because, so for example, talking about the health challenges that women face through menstruation and our cycles and fertility and even our sexual health and sexual pleasure, all of that is still seen as something grotesque. And it means that women have to deal with this physical shame every day still, because it's like, if you talk about menstruation in public, it's like, that's disgusting. Why would you talk about that? If you talk about sexual pleasure in public, that's disgusting as a woman. And there's almost this weird averse reaction to it. And I think it's less about like monitoring, because women have always been monitored. And it's more about, hey, if, you know, right now I'm writing the Bad Bitch Business Bible, and I was initially potentially censored for that. So my book with HarperCollins is coming out in 2023, and I'm about 50% of the way through the manuscript. And when I first pitched, my agent first pitched the editors, the questions I got was, hey, well, do you think if you use the word bitch that the JP Morgan's women's business group won't be able to share it with their women? And I was like, that's the whole point, is I'm reclaiming language that has been bastardized. Just feminine words have been bastardized. And I'm like, I'm reclaiming that. And plus, there's a man named Mark Manson who wrote a book called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, and it sold millions of copies and no one said anything to him. So I am going to write the Bad Bitch Business Bible. And lo and behold, you know, HarperCollins like, got it, cool, well, we'll take it. But I think, again, I've seen this sort of fear of women using language powerfully. And I think, so this, again, if it's, are we gonna monitor, is this okay? And it's more of, well, maybe let's step back and think about what do we actually want to create space for? What does powerful voices like that we need heard, what does that actually mean to be open and transparent about dialogue and taboo topics that we normally haven't been able to discuss?
Yes. So, and I'm going to move off this topic quickly, but let me just clarify one thought, which is, you know, with the media roundtable, what we're trying to do is not censor people or shut down voices. We believe that there are a lot of people that are trying to take people off of platforms and not let, you know, different ideas be heard, and we don't want that. I think the challenge is that if there's no accountability, then things get crazy fast, right? And then the loudest voices, the most extreme voices are the ones that get the attention and thereby the most impressions, therefore the most advertising revenue. So when I bring up a subject like how do we use sentiment analysis to change the narratives to a more healthy way, it would be like, you know, if let's say that we're talking about menstruation, and let's say that I'm talking about it in a way that's, you know, super ignorant, which I think happens on the show all the time with all sorts of topics. But if I'm unaware of the way that I'm talking about something and the negative reactions that the sentiment that I'm expressing is coming across, I think awareness of that can help me change as a content creator. And I hope that the marketplace will want to honor voices that are affirming and starting to change some of the narratives. Because right now, I think things are just set and you don't necessarily realize till you watch, like, I don't know if you've watched a 10-year-old movie lately, but it's like, you can see the way that communication is changing and the things that were common and acceptable to say in the past no longer are. And I know people can get carried away with that, but I think the direction is very healthy. But until you have awareness of it, it's very hard to know what to change and what the problems are. So that's sort of the approach that we're taking on this. And maybe there won't be a fit for it. But I'm excited about your book. That's awesome. When does that come out?
In 2023.
2023. Wow. Okay. So in 2022, why don't we talk a little bit about your bad bitch empire?
So the bad bitch empire, I define a bad bitch as a woman who unapologetically takes charge of her body, her boundaries, and her bank account. And the mission of the bad bitch empire is to help women build unapologetic self-worth and wealth through the power of Web3. And so I am deep in the crypto hole of the rabbit hole, and the power of blockchain is really it's revolutionary because it has the ability for the first time for people to have ownership in their data and the brands that they care about and the brands that they create. And it's permissionless technology. We don't need permission from a central authority. So I think there's a real opportunity for women in particular, underrepresented individuals, to be part of creating change in a new financial system. And so as part of the Bad Bitch Empire, I've launched the Bad Bitch Bitcoin Bootcamp. It's a 4-week bootcamp to teach women everything from how to securely open up their wallets, what is blockchain technology, to learning how to do your own research on some of the 16,500 tokens that are available right now to invest in, how to figure out what NFTs are. We go NFT shopping together and enter into some of these Discord communities. And ultimately, it's this idea of helping women get comfortable with investing and building wealth and taking action, because right now still 26% of women only invest in the stock market, only 15% of women are investing in crypto, and the wealth gap is still going to get bigger and bigger, especially when we see the alpha that comes from crypto and where the technology is going. And so my mission is really to make sure that women aren't left behind as we start building this new digital economic system, and to make sure that they have a voice in shaping what that looks like.
So someday I want to launch a podcast. It's just people explaining the blockchain to their parents and grandparents. So to be in a position of authority where you can talk confidently about it is always impressive to me. But I think the idea of decentralizing authority is really interesting. Where I get stuck and where I imagine a lot of people get stuck is like understanding what's a use case in real life in the future, like 10, 20 years out. How does somebody that is launching a podcast, for example, how does that help? How does that change the playing field?
Well, so there is this is actually a good question because I am considering what a decentralized media platform by women for women looks like, where women have the opportunity to participate in something called a DAO, which is a decentralized autonomous organization. It's kind of like a co-op built on the blockchain where people have a vote in the types of content that gets produced, the types of voices that get heard, that there actually is that feedback loop. And going back to barometer, like perhaps those sorts of data can help inform people in terms of sentiment. And I think it's really this idea of by the people for the people. So if you think of what would our climate crisis look like if people actually had a say and decision-making power in leading that direction? Or what would the leadership of our country look like if we actually had transparent voting systems where there wasn't voter fraud and it wasn't in some ways easy to manipulate the system, and the media wasn't still controlled mostly by central authorities and at least central tech players. And so I think it's really just with, even if you don't understand the technology, it's like, what would different systems where we have problems currently, what would they look like if it was by the people for the people, and there were certain incentive systems that would allow those who are more thoughtful, more invested to have different levels of voting.
So, and that could be a rabbit hole that does a whole nother podcast series. So I'm not going to ask follow-ups on that, but we've got Bad Bitch Business Bible. We've got Bad Bitch Bitcoin Bootcamp.
Yeah.
And we have a podcast coming out, do we not?
We do.
I know, this is like your sixth one, or
well, yeah, I said that I drop podcasts the same way musical artists drop albums. They reflect a different phase in my life that I'm going through. And so I'm dropping officially today, when you're listening to it, the Bad Bitch Empire. And this is a show to help women unapologetically take charge of your body, your boundaries, your bank account. You're going to hear from bad bitches around the world who are breaking barriers, building empires in so many different industries, and really hearing those hard lessons learned that they will never teach you in school about being a bad bitch in business and being successful, especially in male-dominated industries. And I think I think it's about time that we had those role models, those powerful women who are in business, who are crushing it in with their bank accounts, holding strong on their boundaries and really loving their body and what that looks like. So I'm really excited about this one because I think it also reflects the place in my life right now where I feel like a bad bitch. I walk into a room and I'm like, I rock. And so
congratulations on that.
and I also say that you can tell a bad bitch is in the room because like the baddest bitch is the one who has so much love to give, because no one is her competition. And it's like when you love yourself, there's always room for other powerful women. And so the three values of the Bad Bitch Empire are collaboration, action, and positivity. So we are all about collaboration over competition. And especially in the Web3 world, we say we have a collaborative advantage, it's about that, not a competitive advantage. And so we learn together, we build together, we invest together as women. And then action is for our education. We don't just sit back and learn and passively digest information. You actually take action. I have every woman take the radical self-responsibility pledge, which says, I commit to taking radical self-responsibility for myself, for my actions, my thoughts, my feelings, my outcomes. I am the author of my own story and I control my own reality. And then the final value is positivity, because no matter what happens, There's always opportunities for growth. We look for solutions, not problems, and we continue moving forward.
This is wonderful. And if people want to get involved with the various projects you've got going, where would you direct them?
So you can follow me on all social channels at Lisa Carmen Wang, and you can join the Bad Bitch Empire at thebadbitchempire.com.
Lisa Carmen Wang, thank you. You've been vulnerable, you've been honest, you've been challenging. This is really good. I hope we can talk again. And I hope that those of you listening that are in the advertising community get a chance to provide some sponsorship for some of this work, because it's good content. So thank you for joining us here.
Thank you.
And now I'm going to do my wrap up. This show is dedicated to our mission of mobilizing marketers to advance truth and civility in journalism. We value clarity, truth, fairness, respect, de-escalation, and tolerance, and we invite you to connect with us at mediaroundtable.com. Now, if you found the show helpful and you want to follow us, please check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen, because there's like 100 different platforms. It's always free, and if you're a marketer and you want some support to live out some of the values that we're pushing here, you can get in touch with our ad agency, which is called Oxford Road, by going to oxfordroad.com and subscribe to our weekly newsletter, The Influencer. Special thanks to Bianca, Kyle, Jennifer, Amy, the team at Podcast One, and Lana, who has lent us some wonderful space to do this interview. As always, influence responsibly.